on BBC One with Jane Hill in the studio and Clive Myrie at Downing Street.
Boris Johnson leads the Conservatives to a resounding election victory. They win their largest majority since the Thatcher years, gaining scores of seats from Labour. Boris Johnson now has the majority he wanted and says the UK will leave the European Union next month.
With this mandate and this majority, we will at last be able to do what?
Jeremy Corbyn says he won't fight another election after Labour's worst performance since 1935.
I will not lead the party in any future general election campaign. I will discuss with our party to ensure there is a process now of reflection.
The SNP strengthens its hold on Scotland, gaining 13 seats, including that of the Liberal Democrat leader, Jo Swinson. A trip to the palace this morning for the Prime Minister, where the Queen invited him to form a new government.
Coming up on BBC News, we'll be drilling into all the numbers from the night. We will pick out the patterns and we will show you where this election was won and lost.
A very good afternoon to you from Downing Street, where Boris Johnson is in number 10 after his decisive victory in the general election. Now, with one seat left to declare, the Conservatives have a majority of 78, their biggest since 1987. They captured a swathe of traditional Labour strongholds, with Jeremy Corbyn calling it a very disappointing night and saying he won't lead the party into another election. There was also disappointment for the Liberal Democrats, with their leader, Jo Swinson, losing her seat. She's stepping down as leader. And in Scotland, the SNP maintained their dominance, picking up seats. There were losses for the DUP in Northern Ireland. In a triumphant speech this morning, Boris Johnson vowed to repay the trust of voters and deliver Brexit. Well, let's take a look at some of the results in more detail. Now, with just St Ives to declare, the Conservatives now have 364 seats, a net gain of 47. Labour are on 203, down 59. The SNP are on 48, up 13, with the Liberal Democrats on 11, down 1. The DUP have 8, Sinn Féin 7, and other parties a total of 8. Well, our first report this afternoon is from Jonathan Blake, and it contains flash photography.
A new dawn, he says. Boris Johnson is back in power, but things are different now. The Prime Minister left Downing Street this morning to meet the Queen and ask to form a new government. Now, though, with the majority in Parliament and the mandate from the country that he badly needed. It was a convincing victory. In seat after seat, the Conservatives held their own territory and took Labour's heartlands too. From England's northeast to South Wales, this was a night that saw the electoral map redrawn.
We did it.
Vindication for a campaign that capitalised on the frustration that so many had felt.
Well, we did it. We did it. We pulled it off, didn't we? We pulled it off. We broke the deadlock. We ended the gridlock. We smashed the roadblock.
And after turning once solid Labour seats Tory blue, he promised not to let voters down.
Your hand may have quivered over the ballot paper as before you put your cross in the Conservative box. And you may intend to return to Labour next time round. And if that is the case, I am humbled that you have put your trust in me and that you have put your trust in us.
Disbelief at first as Labour saw their strongholds fall. Those on the losing side left deflated and disillusioned, well aware it was over for the leader in whom many had so much hope.
I will not lead the party in any future general election campaign. I will discuss with our party to ensure there is a process now of reflection on this result and on the policies that the party will take going forward. and I will lead the party during that period to ensure that discussion takes place and we move on into the future.
Are you going to resign, Mr Corbyn?
His supporters blame Brexit for their devastating defeat, but others in the party say the leader was part of the problem and a fight for Labour's future has already begun.
We tried our best to have a policy of principle where we bring the country back together again, both Remain and Leavers, but that obviously proved to be impossible.
Have you lost your seat, Miss Swinson?
Disaster for the Liberal Democrats. Their leader had lost her seat, her party and its supporters in despair.
For millions of people in our country, these results will bring dread and dismay, and people are looking for hope.
But celebration for the Scottish National Party, winning 13 more seats, boosting its presence in Parliament and helping the leader argue for independence.
I don't pretend that every single person that voted SNP yesterday will necessarily support independence, but there has been a strong endorsement in this election of Scotland having a choice over our future.
In Northern Ireland, a bruising night for the main nationalist and unionist parties. The DUP and Sinn Féin both lost seats. The Brexit Party, once considered a threat to the Conservatives, did not win any seats, but still claims some of the credit.
If I hadn't set up the Brexit Party, Theresa May would still be Prime Minister, Brexit would be no closer, and Boris Johnson would not have achieved this great victory. So I do feel I've helped to create what happened last night to some extent. Now look, we are going to leave the European Union now at the end of January.
That is just one promise Boris Johnson will be expected to stick to. He has pledged to work night and day and lead what he calls a people's government. He now has a wider support base and a stronger grip on power. With that may come a heavier weight of responsibility. Jonathan Blake, BBC News.
Well, our assistant political editor, Norman Smith, is with me. Norman, the result last night, it bore out what the polls have been saying. Apart from the scale and the magnitude, no one predicted that.
No, this is not just another election win. This is an epic, defining election win, which represents a moment of change in the history of this country. Comparable, I would say, to Mrs Thatcher's first win in 1979 or Tony Blair's in 1997, because we are embarking now on a new course. I don't think anyone seriously would suggest Brexit is not now going to happen. The election has irrevocably decided that. Secondly, it's the manner in which Boris Johnson won. Like Mrs Thatcher and Tony Blair, he reached out to communities who would normally never vote for them. And we talk rather sort of abstractly about punching through Labour's red wall. What that means in human terms is a Conservative winning in steel towns, pit villages, proud working class communities where many feel their livelihoods were decimated by the Tories under Mrs Thatcher. And frankly, you know, in times gone by, they would probably rather slaughter the firstborn than vote Conservative. Last night, they did vote Tory. But it does mean for Boris Johnson, he now has basically a blank sheet of paper. He has a crushed opposition, an overwhelming majority. He's not beholden to any section of the Tory party. He can do what he wants. And we will now find out who is the real Boris Johnson, because he's travelled very light politically with his beliefs, and there are some in the Tory party who hope we will all now see emerging the old Mayor of London Boris Johnson, the One Nation Boris Johnson. But we are now going to find out who Boris Johnson really is.
Sure. OK, Norman, thank you. We're going to get a little bit more from you later in the programme. But what about the other side? Well, it was Labour's worst performance since 1935. Party members will now have to analyse what was behind the defeat. Here's Ian Watson.
Labour hasn't had so few MPs since the 1930s, but after this disastrous defeat, Jeremy Corbyn has announced a process of reflection. And he seems in no rush to go.
I will talk to our national executive about what we do in the future. I called for last night a period of reflection in the party, and obviously the ruling body of the party, our national executive, will decide what process we follow then for the election of a successor to me. But I am quite prepared, and I was elected to do so, to lead the party until that takes place.
The scale of the defeat came as a shock. Watch the expression of these activists change when they saw the exit poll. Those close to Jeremy Corbyn are trying to explain it away as a one-off defeat based on Brexit, with no need for a bigger change of direction.
The fact that we've went for a second referendum is the real issue within the Labour Party. It's about a lack of trust.
And although this Labour candidate is a critic of Jeremy Corbyn's, he agrees that Brexit played a big part in his defeat.
Some of the siren voices in the shadow cabinet who have big Liberal Democrats votes in their London seats decided that stopping Brexit and therefore lining themselves up for future leadership bids was much more important than respecting the votes in marginal constituencies across the Midlands.
But in an emotional night, many of those who were critical of Jeremy Corbyn blamed the defeat on a lot more than Brexit.
It can't just be, some people would say Jeremy, some people would say Brexit. This is about more than that. This is about a national trend. And this is something that the Labour Party's got to reflect on and come back far stronger from. But it's been painful along the way.
It's not just Jeremy, it's the wider Corbynism in the politics round about that have helped lead us to this terrible result.
This is devastating. This is seismic. This is the end. So for me, this is about whether the Labour Party even has any right to exist.
I'm told that Jeremy Corbyn is prepared to stay on for the next few months. But some senior Labour figures are also telling me they'll be pushing him to resign sooner rather than later. Now, don't expect any of the leadership contenders to declare themselves today. What we're really seeing is a battle over the reasons for Labour's defeat, because winning that is a precondition for winning the leadership itself.
Mr Corbyn, it's over, Mr Corbyn.
When emotions are less raw, Labour will have to decide if it simply wants a new leader or if what it really needs is a new direction. Ian Watson, BBC News.
The inquest begins for Labour. Well, let's take a look at the picture across the rest of the UK. Here's Sophie Rayworth.
So on this map, each constituency has been shrunk to exactly the same size. One hexagon is one MP, and it gives you a much better idea of where the balance of power now lies. Walk around here, this is the outskirts of London with its 73 MPs still dominated by Labour. But that is not the picture across much of the rest of the United Kingdom. That's where the dramatic changes have taken place overnight. Look at what was Labour's red wall. It has been massively shrunk, cracked by these blue seats, the seats that the Conservatives have taken from Labour, like Lee in Greater Manchester. It had a huge Labour majority of about 9,500, but it has gone Conservative for the first time. Something I couldn't do last night was walk from one coast to the other along Conservative seats. But that is what the Conservatives have achieved. They have moved into these Labour strongholds, like Wakefield, another Labour seat that had been in Labour hands since 1932. It is now blue. And take a look at Scotland, almost completely SNP yellow. And that has taken some casualties with it, like the leader of the Liberal Democrats, Jo Swinson. But when you look back across our map, with all the constituencies at the same size, you see just how dramatically it has changed.
Sophie Rayworth there with the national picture. Well, it was a good night for the SNP, taking 48 of the 59 seats in Scotland, with Labour and the Conservatives suffering defeats. The country's First Minister, Nicola Sturgeon, said she now has a fresh mandate for another referendum on Scottish independence. Let's get more from Alexandra Mackenzie, and her report contains some flash photography.
For the SNP, it's a win beyond their own expectation. In Glasgow, Nicola Sturgeon saw a clean sweep, with her party winning all 7 seats. Scotland's First Minister was delighted the SNP took the Eastern Bartonshire seat from the Liberal Democrat leader Jo Swinson.
I have enjoyed serving our communities.
The Liberal Democrats stay on 4 seats in Scotland. Jo Swinson is the first main Westminster Party leader to lose her seat in an election since 1931. For the Tories, a different picture in Scotland. They just held 7 of their 13 seats.
Ian Myrie is duly elected as a Member of Parliament.
Labour lost all but 1 of their 7 seats. Ian Myrie, holding on to Edinburgh South, called for change.
This party must listen, and this party
must respond, or this party will die.
Scotland's First Minister wanted Boris Johnson out of Downing Street, but knows a majority Tory government could help her move closer to Scottish independence.
The Scottish Government will next week publish the detailed democratic case for a transfer of power to enable a referendum to be put beyond legal challenge. I have been clear that a referendum must be the responsibility of the Scottish Parliament.
So this election has emphasised that Scotland is going in a very different political direction from the rest of the UK. Alexandra Mackenzie, BBC News, Glasgow.
The view from Scotland there, where of course the loss of Jo Swinson's seat to the SNP capped a dreadful night for the Liberal Democrats going into this election with so many hopes. Tom Simons has been following their campaign.
Yeah, it was a dreadful defeat for Jo Swinson. She'd only been in the job of leader for 144 days, and during that period, especially the last few weeks, her poll ratings, personal poll ratings, appeared to slip and slip. What else went wrong for the Lib Dems? Well, they looked at the pre-election polls that suggested people wanted a second referendum and to revoke Article 50. They went hard for Remain, and then the Remain vote wasn't there for them. And there's also some evidence that they and Labour split the vote against the Conservatives. In the Kensington constituency, where Sam Gyimah was their candidate, the Conservative defector, he got 9,000 votes. And partly as a result of that, the Labour sitting MP, Emma Dent-Coad, who had a small majority, lost her seat to the Conservatives in the seat where Grenfell Tower stands. And one more thing, I think they were constantly asked, the Lib Dems, who would they support, Boris Johnson or Jeremy Corbyn, in the event of a hung parliament, and they often found it hard to answer that question. Jo Swinson's going to make a speech to her supporters in an hour's time or so, but the party now has to find a new leader from a relatively small pool of MPs, just 11 in Parliament.
OK, Tom, thank you for that. Tom Simons there following the Liberal Democrat campaign. Well, in Northern Ireland, there are now more nationalist and unionist MPs, and Anita McVeigh's report on the situation there contains some flash photography.
A hug of consolation from DUP leader Arlene Foster for Nigel Dodds, losing the Belfast North seat after almost 20 years. Did voters punish him for being the face of Brexit for the party at Westminster?
I am absolutely very disappointed, not just for North Belfast, but actually for Northern Ireland, that they're losing such a great advocate in Nigel Dodds.
The victor in the constituency, Sinn Féin's John Finucane, son of solicitor Pat Finucane, murdered by loyalist paramilitaries in 1989. Voters choosing a Remain-supporting nationalist over a pro-Brexit unionist.
I think people saw this as an election as a chance to have that Remain voice heard, and I think it's been heard very loudly tonight.
There was victory too for the cross-community alliance party's Stephen Farry in North Down, a growth in support for the centre ground. And the nationalist SDLP are back on the Westminster map with 2 MPs. Voters in Foyle choosing Colm Eastwood over Sinn Féin, who refused to take their seats in Parliament.
You want someone to go to Westminster to fight your case, to stand up to Boris Johnson, to protect us from Brexit, but you also want us to get back to work in Stormont.
It's a very significant moment for Northern Ireland, which has for the first time a majority of nationalist MPs, but none of them, neither nationalist, unionist nor the cross-community alliance party MP, back Boris Johnson's current Brexit deal. Brexit, though, not the only concern here, as voters wonder whether talks aimed at restarting the Northern Ireland Assembly at Stormont after nearly 3 years can work. Anita McVeigh, BBC News, Belfast.
It wasn't a great night for Labour in Wales either. The Conservatives have taken seats from them across North Wales, as well as Bridgend in the south. Howell Griffith is in Wrexham for us. A turn up for the books yet again.
Absolutely, and Wrexham is a town which has never returned a Conservative MP before. But last night, this was another brick in that red wall which turned blue, a red wall which has been bulldozed by Boris Johnson. Brexit was definitely the key issue in many of those Welsh constituencies. Wales overall voted in favour of Brexit in 2016. But the Welsh Labour Party wanted to remain. So in constituencies like in Wrexham, in Delyn, in the Vale of Clwyd, this batch of seats up in North East Wales, people for the first time have put their trust in Boris Johnson, maybe just lending them his vote, as they said. So what will he do with their support over the next 5 years? Well, before that, what will the Labour Party do with its situation? It is still the biggest party in Wales, taking 22 of the 40 seats, but that's their worst return since 1983. Jeremy Corbyn really didn't go down well with Welsh voters. But what about the Welsh Labour government, which has been running the NHS here? How much accountability can it take? Finally, Plaid Cymru, a solid, stable night for them. They went in with 4 and came out with 4 constituencies.
All right, Howell, thank you for that. Howell Griffith there, live in Wrexham. While the Conservatives captured seats across the Midlands back in England and the north of England in areas that have voted Labour for generations. Christian Fraser was watching as the so-called Red Wall crumbled.
It is, as we've been saying, the best result for the Conservatives since 1987. Conversely, for the Labour Party, it is the worst since the war, worse even than Michael Foot in 1983 in terms of seats. And for the Liberal Democrats, depending on that seat we just mentioned, it could be worse than even 2017, though they would point you to their vote share, which is up 4%. I'd like to draw your attention just to that, though. It's been a personal triumph for Boris Johnson, no doubt about that, but he's only put on 1.2% on what Theresa May had in 2017. So what's been different? Well, the difference is that the Labour vote in working-class, post-industrial areas has collapsed. So you've seen that in North East Wales, you've seen it in the West Midlands, in South Yorkshire, in the North East of England. And when you look at, and you really drill down into the numbers, you'll see that the Conservative vote share is higher where there is a higher percentage of working class people. I'll show you what I mean. So these are seats that have all gone from red to blue. Bassetlaw, Redcar, Scunthorpe, Lee, Dudley North, Great Grimsby, Sedgefield, Rother Valley. Let's have a look at Bassetlaw. It was the biggest swing of the night. So John Mann standing down, former mining town in Nottinghamshire, big Leave area. You look at the vote share, you can see Labour's vote collapsing, the Brexit Party eating into a little bit of it, but look at that massive swing, 18%. Another one, Dudley North. It's never been anything but Labour, OK? Big Leave area. Again, you look at the vote share, almost a straight swap, Conservative to Labour, another massive swing. Here's another extraordinary one, Sedgefield, the former seat of Tony Blair. In 2005, he had a majority of over 18,000 after 9 years of Labour opposition. Look at that. The Conservatives now have a majority of 4,500. Again, another big vote share change. Brexit Party eating into that again. And we'll just pick out one last one, because this is rather interesting. Rother Valley, it's never been anything but Tory. It's been Labour since the First World War, since 1918. Big Leave area, but look at this. This is the one that Nigel Farage will point to. The Brexit Party eating massively into the Labour vote. And again, a very big swing from Labour to the Conservatives.
Christian Fraser there mentioning Rother Valley in Yorkshire. Big turnout there and a massive swing towards the Conservatives from Labour. Never happened before in parliamentary history. Dan Johnson, our correspondent, has sent us this report from there.
The coal this town was built on made the area solid Labour for more than a century. They used to talk about the Socialist Republic of South Yorkshire, but not now. Brexit has brought out new blue support here.
First time ever, and I've done it. I've just had no faith in Jeremy Corbyn.
3.5 years, Europe have been literally laughing at us. So
you think this is what needed to happen?
Yeah, yeah.
Charity shops and food banks are busy here. It's a poor area.
We're doing a prize raffle for it to try and get money out there to the people who can't afford anything anymore.
So loyal Labour voters like Aaron are sad, but maybe not surprised.
Maltby's now full of nothing. We've got no actual shops.
Why would people vote Conservative if all that's true?
Problem is, it was a popularity. People did not like Jeremy Corbyn a lot and what he had to say, but people wanted Brexit.
Tory has been a dirty word here, especially since the 1980s when Maltby was a key battleground as striking miners faced the police, backed by Margaret Thatcher's Conservative government.
The muckstack still stands, but the pits and the steelworks have gone. And with them went the old loyalties to the working class, to the union movement and to the Labour Party. Time and again, people have said, if my dad knew how I voted in this election, he'd turn in his grave. This is not just old allegiances that have been broken, it's people rejecting their DNA.
I feel like a traitor, actually, but...
You do?
Well, it's a Labour, Rother Valley, isn't it? So it's...
Always been Labour.
It has.
And Corbyn's unpopular. So...
Can you tell me why?
I don't know. I didn't feel he were somebody he could engage with.
Brexit Party support was key, but it's new Conservative MPs like Alexander Stafford now speaking for these communities. They've seen plenty of change here before, but this is a loud, profound choice for something new. Dan Johnson, BBC News, Rother Valley.
So much thrown up into the air by this election for the Labour Party. Huge inquest taking place within their ranks. I'll be back a little bit later in the programme from number 10, but now it's back to Jane in the studio.
Clive, thank you very much. The time is 26 minutes past 1. Just a reminder of our main story this lunchtime. And Boris Johnson has led the Conservatives to a resounding general election victory. Jeremy Corbyn says he won't fight another election after Labour's worst performance since 1935.
Coming up on BBC News, we will show you some of the biggest swings of the night. We'll look at the seats that switched from red to blue, and we'll also drill into some of the trends that explain where this election was won and lost.
And we will just take a look at a few other stories here this afternoon, because accident and emergency waiting times in England last month were the worst on record. 81.4% of patients were seen within 4 hours in November, well short of the target of 95%. The number of people waiting for other treatment, such as hip and knee replacements, rose to nearly 4.5 million in October, and that is the highest ever level. Rescue teams have recovered 6 bodies from White Island in New Zealand following Monday's fatal volcanic eruption. Police divers had been looking for 2 more people who are still unaccounted for. 8 people are confirmed as having died. About 20 are still in hospital with severe burns. And we will pause from the news and catch up with the weather prospects as well, as you would expect us. Darren Bett has joined me. Hello, Darren.
Hello there, Jane. After the cloud and rain that we had yesterday, we've got something a bit drier and brighter across the UK today. Many places actually seeing some sunshine. There is still some wet weather around. This is the recent radar picture over the past few hours. That rain's cleared the southeast, but we've got the stream of showers for Northern Ireland over the Irish Sea into North Wales, northwest England. That's not moving anywhere. The rain's easing off in the northeast of Scotland, but it'll probably turn wetter and windier in the far southwest later this afternoon. Temperatures are chilly-ish, 6 to 8 degrees. Through this evening, a bit more movement. That band of showers will move northwards up into southern Scotland. Some snow over the hills. It turns drier in the northeast of Scotland, but a lot of showers running in across the rest of the UK. It's going to be quite windy overnight as well. Generally keeping the temperatures up, but you can see we're close to freezing, even in towns and cities across the northern half of the UK. Into the weekend, it remains chilly, cold enough for some more snow over the hills. There'll be some sunshine at times, but some showers as well. It's going to be quite windy across England and Wales in particular, where we'll see a band of showers pushing its way eastwards during the morning, allowing more sunshine and dry weather to arrive in the afternoon. But we'll keep some showers wintry over the hills across Northern Ireland and into Scotland as well. And it's going to be quite a chilly day. Temperatures struggling typically to 5 to 7 degrees. There's some wet weather arriving in the southwest late on in the afternoon. That will push its way across the UK on Saturday night and could well bring a few centimetres of snow to the hills of Wales, particularly northern England, and a bit more snow over the high ground in Scotland as well, where we've got a fairly widespread slight frost, the risk of some icy patches across the northern half of the UK. As we head into the second half of the weekend, there should be more showers more widely for England and Wales, some of them heavy, again touch wintry over the hills in the north and quite windy in the southwest of England. Lighter winds though, I think, for Scotland and Northern Ireland. Here, not as many showers, but a cold day with temperatures typically 3 or 4 degrees, and it's going to stay cold for the first half of next week. Jane.
Thanks very much, Darren. Let's head straight back to Downing Street and rejoin Clive.
Yeah, thanks, Jane. Sterling and the stock market have risen following the election result overnight. Let's get more analysis from our business editor, Simon Jack, who's at Canary Wharf in London. Simon, the markets, it seems positive as far as this election result is concerned.
Yeah, a Boris win was always what they were expecting here, but the size of his thumping majority surprised even traders here. That means we've got a functional government, a parliament that will work, and they like that. They also think the majority is so big that it would effectively neutralise some of the hard Brexit elements in his own party who would be prepared to or even agitate for leaving the EU without a deal. So that is positive. We also saw some politically sensitive stocks like banking, house builders did very well, up double digits in terms of percent. And also remember the utilities that Jeremy Corbyn wanted to nationalise. That threat evaporated overnight, and therefore they all did very well. Still some concerns, Scottish referendum potential, and also this EU deal will take some doing. That is what they will be worried about next.
OK, Simon, thank you for that. Simon Jack, our business editor there. Let's get some final thoughts now on all of this from our assistant political editor, Norman Smith, who's with me. A divisive campaign, a divisive election, a referendum result that split the country. How does Boris Johnson bring us all back together again?
Well, you're right. That is the key challenge. I think part of it is tone. We saw a little bit of that this morning. There wasn't that sort of triumphalism, gloating at the hammering of his opponents. So I think we'll see more of that, more emollient, inclusive language. Part of it is a hope that once the first phase of Brexit is delivered by the end of January, there will be a natural healing process. People will think, well, there's no point fighting the old wars, whatever side they were on, we need to move on. Part of it will be a need to ensure his promise to ensure those towns who felt left behind actually do receive the resources that they want, and part of it will be making things happen. All those challenges, whether it be about housing or social care, getting things done.
Indeed. OK, Norman Smith, our assistant political editor there. Well, there is lots more on the election online. You can look up results in every constituency using your interactive map, and you can get live reaction and analysis from the experts on our website. That's at the BBC News app. Now, let's leave you with some of the most memorable moments of the last few hours. Have a very good afternoon.
I want to thank the people of this country for turning out to vote in a December election that we didn't want to call, but which I think has turned out to be a historic election.
I will not lead the party in any future general election campaign. I will discuss with our party to ensure there is a process now of reflection